Good morning, students. Today I am going to discuss with you all the next unit, that is negotiable instrument, which is as per our syllabus is unit 3. Negotiable instruments, as the title itself says, negotiable means transferable, where instruments means document. So negotiable instrument refers to a document which can be legally transferred from one person to another, which always concludes with a monetary consideration. So negotiable instruments are described according to the Negotiable Instrument Act of 1881. So as you can see on the screen, there is one beautiful definition given here according to section 13 of the Negotiable Instrument Act, which states that negotiable instrument means a promissory note, bill of exchange or check payable either to order to bearer, whether the word order or bearer appears on the instrument or not, which means either it has to bring a monetary consideration to the bearer of the instrument, or on the order of the holder it has to bring a monetary consideration for the person to whom it is being transferred. So negotiable instrument, as per Negotiable Instrument Act, it includes three important instruments. They are checks, bill of exchange and promissory note. Negotiable instrument always comes with an essential elements or features. So that is what we are going to discuss. First of all, it is freely transferable. So negotiable instruments can be transferred from one person to another. Then there is a transfer free from any defects. So which means the person who is transferring the negotiable instrument will not have any kind of defect and to him, so he can easily transfer it from himself to another person. Right to sue, it confers a right on the holder to sue in his own name or in case of deed. Then there are some more where it says under essential elements, it says it must be in writing. So any negotiable instrument, any instrument which has to be considered as negotiable, it has to be in writing only. Then it has to be signed by the maker or drawer of the instrument. So it is always an unconditional promise to pay a certain sum of money, which contains an unconditional order. It may be in case of promissory note or bill of exchange, etc. So instrument must call for payment of certain sum of money to a person. Then instrument must be payable at time. So there will be a certain time period within which it has to be it has to be paid, or it has to be transferred from one person to another. Then in case of bill of exchange, if we are specifically saying, it must be named or described with reasonable certainty. Certainty refers to a certain amount of money which need to be paid from one person to another. How much he is paying, how much they have to pay to another party, that must be certain. And certainty, if we are talking about, there must be certainty even regarding time as well. So there must be a specific date, time period which will be given if we are talking about bill of exchange or check. Okay, so these are some of the essential elements or features of negotiable instrument. We are talking about, as I told you earlier, there are three important negotiable instruments which we are going to discuss here under this particular unit. Under that, the first instrument what we are going to discuss is promissory note. So the three instruments are promissory note, bill of exchange and checks. So we are starting with promissory note. Promissory note is defined as per the Negotiable Instrument Act, as here it is given. So it says, promissory note is a legal instrument in which one party promises in writing to pay a determinate sum of money to the other, either at a fixed or determinable future time or on demand of the payee under specific terms. So as it says, it is an instrument in writing. It is a document which contains an unconditional order to pay by the maker of the instrument to pay a certain sum of money to some other party who is going to be payee. So there are two important parties under promissory note. One is the maker of the instrument maker is a person who makes the promissory note and promises to pay the money stated therein. So whatever the amount that he has to pay to another person, he has to specifically mention that in the promissory note, how much he has to pay, when he is going to pay, and at what terms and conditions going to pay, whether he is going to pay at one particular time period or whether he is going to pay on a future date, that need to be specified under promissory note. The second party under promissory note is payee. He is a person to whom the amount of the promissory note is payable. So when maker makes the instrument promissory note, he has to specifically give to whom the money is going to be paid. So that person to whom the money is or the payment is made, that person is called payee. So again, here we are going to discuss the essential elements or the features or characteristics of valid promissory note. First of all, it must be in writing. See, it is not only promissory note or bill of exchange or check. Any negotiable instrument, any instrument that we need to make it a negotiable one, it has to be always in writing only. So it has to be available in physical form so that it acts as a guarantee or a valid instrument to transfer from one person to another person. So that is why always the very first feature of any negotiable instrument gives always, you can see even in future, it must be in writing. The second feature, as it says here, an express promise to pay. So what exactly promissory note contains? The maker of the instrument has to express how much money he has to pay to payee. So he is expressing through promissory note that how much he is going to make the payment to payee or to the person to whom he has to make the payment. That is the second feature. Third feature states promise must be certain and unconditional. Promise must be certain, which means when he is going to make the payment, what is the mode of payment that he has to make. So that need to be properly mentioned and it should be clearly expressed in promissory note, and always it is an unconditional order on the part of the maker to make the payment to payee. So that is what the term unconditional refers to. Fourth feature is the instrument must be signed by the maker. So maker of the instrument has to sign in the promissory note. Unless and until he signs in the instrument, it will not be a valid promissory note. So the maker has to sign in the promissory note to make it more valid and legal. The amount of the instrument must be certain. So to whom the money is going to be, which means he has to specifically mention who is the payee to whom he is going to make the payment. The next one is promise to pay must be in legal tender money. So he cannot say I am going to make payment in some other foreign currency. Wherever he is making, whichever the country he is residing, he has to make the payment only in that particular legal tender money only. So bank note and currency note is not a promissory note. Actually, to be specific on this particular point, earlier it used to be considered currency note as a bearer promissory note, but however, it is not actually included under the Negotiable Instrument Act of 1881, even though earlier it used to be considered as a bearer promissory note, but it is actually removed from this particular aspect as per Reserve Bank of India Act of 1935. Okay, so it says bank note or currency note, now it's not a promissory note and it cannot be considered as a promissory note. So parties must be certain is one more valid essential, where it says both the parties, maker as well as payee, must be certain individual. So maker, when he makes a promissory note to make a payment, is giving a guarantee that he is going to make the payment to payee, where he is also an individual, a person, as well as to whom he is making the payment, the other party, that is payee, also must be certain individual only. So that is about promissory note. We are moving to the next negotiable instrument, that is bill of exchange. I think you would have heard about bill of exchange more than promissory note. So generally, if we are talking about bill of exchange, usually where we can hear this, Bill of exchange is a receipt which arises out of the genuine trade transaction between the buyer and seller in the business activity. See, as we all know, we are the retail customers. When we go to a shop to buy something, we make the payment immediately when we buy any products. But in case of business transactions, the payments will not be done immediately. So the buyer of the products, it may be distributor or it may be any chain of distribution line, they are going to give a promise to the seller or the manufacturer, stating that when they are going to make the payment or they are going to buy some time on or before certain time period to make the payment. The guarantee what they give to the seller or manufacturer after buying certain stock of the commodities, that receipt is called as bill of exchange. We have two, actually, where we have different types of bill of exchange. It can be inland bill, it can be foreign bill, it can be demand bill, or it can be time or term bill. So there are various types of bill of exchange which are used in the business transactions. So if we are starting this particular concept, bill of exchange, as per the definition it is given, that is as per section 5 of the Negotiable Instrument Act of 1881, states that an instrument in writing containing an unconditional order signed by the maker directing a certain person to pay certain sum of money only to or to order of a certain person or to the bearer of the instrument. So it says it is a written order signed by one person who is the drawer, requiring the second person, that is drawee, to pay on demand or at a stated date at an amount of money to or to the order of a specified person or the payee. So bill of exchange, as we know, like I also told you that it is more common in business transactions. So here, when seller sells, if we are explaining this with an illustration, suppose if a seller sells a stock of commodity to buyer, after buying the stock, the value of the products what he is purchasing, he will be mentioning it in the bill, and he states that he is going to make the payment on or before certain time period. In India, 90 days bill of exchange is more common, where he buys a time of 90 days to make the payment, and he has to sign. So he is the maker or the of the instrument. He has to sign in the instrument, and the same receipt will be passed on to the seller. That instrument act as a negotiable instrument for seller in order to make immediate cash requirement in the business activity. So that is what here it is stated. And under bill of exchange, there are three parties involved: drawer of the instrument, who is nothing but the maker of the bill of exchange and is responsible for the contents written in the bill. So the contents refers to he is responsible for making the amount what he has specified in the bill. The second party is drawee, the person who is directed to pay that amount of money. Payee is the third party, the person to whom the payment is made by the drawee as per the directions of the drawer. So these are the three parties involved in the bill of exchange. Again, the next topic what we are going to discuss here is the essentials or the features of bill of exchange. So as I told you, even under promissory note, the first and foremost important feature is any negotiable instrument, if we are talking about, it must be in physical form. That means it must be in writing only. So here also you can see the same feature. So it must be in writing. So bill of exchange is very much available in the physical form. Second one, it must contain an unconditional order to pay, because the receipt what he produces, what he generates to make the payment, that will contain an unconditional order to pay. So given specified amount of money to be paid on or before a specified date in the bill. Third feature here, it must be signed by the drawer. Drawer is the maker of the instrument. In order to make the instrument valid and negotiable, he has to sign the instrument that act as a guarantee to the seller or the manufacturer, that is the buyer is going to make the payment on or before the time mentioned in the bill. There must be three parties. As I told you earlier, drawer, drawee and payee are the three parties involved in bill of exchange. The order must be to pay a certain sum of money. So I told you in the beginning of the chapter itself, any negotiable instrument that we are using it is only for the purpose of getting some consideration. That consideration will be only in monetary terms. So that is, when a seller would like to pay a certain sum of money, only then he can generate a bill of exchange where he is going to state give a guarantee that he is going to make the payment of money on or before certain time period. So here it says the order must be to pay a certain sum of money only. The instrument must contain an order to pay money or money only. So it should not be in kind or in some other form. It has to be paid only in the nation's legal tender currency only. It must comply with the formalities as regards to date, consideration, stamp, etc. So there are few more formalities to be fulfilled under bill of exchange in order to make it more negotiable and legal, where date is mandatory. Suppose for example, if we are talking about a time bill or term bill of exchange, both are same here. You would have heard about term bill as well as time bill. Time bill states that he is going to make, the drawer is going to make the payment on or before certain time period. So he has to specify when he is going to make the payment. The date must be specified in the bill. And consideration, how much money he is going to make the payment. What is the amount that he is due to make the payment, that need to be specified in the bill. Stamping, in order to make it more and more authenticated document. In some of the heavy transactions, especially if we are talking about foreign bills, stamping is also very essential, which makes bill of exchange more and more authenticated. So under this particular topic, I would like to give you some more information regarding types of bill of exchange. So bill of exchange is actually there are 6 types of bill of exchange. One, on the basis of the time period, it is classified into demand bill and time bill. As I told you, demand bill is the one what we get when we buy anything and make the payment. So it will be stamped stating paid. The amount is paid, which means we have paid the amount, and the bill what we get from the retail outlets when we go for shopping or purchase any products, that bill is called as demand bill. Time bill or term bill is more often used in domestic trade activities, where whenever the seller or distributor purchases the stock of the commodities from the manufacturer, they are going to give the time bill stating that they are going to buy some time to make the payment. And as I told you earlier, 90 days bill is more common in India. Then the third type is on the basis of object. It is trade bill and accommodation bill. Trade bills are drawn and accepted against the sale and purchase of the goods on credit, where these are drawn by the seller and accepted by the buyer. Accommodation bills, on the other hand, do not involve in sale or purchase of the goods. Rather than they are drawn without any consideration. The intention is to help one party or both the parties financially, this kind of financial accommodation. That is why it is called as accommodation bill. Then fifth type is, actually this classification is on the basis of the place where these bills are used. On this basis, it is classified into inland bills and foreign bills. Inland bills are drawn within the country, where any kind of trade transaction is happening between the buyer and seller who belong to same country. So in all domestic transactions, business transactions, inland bills are used. In foreign trade, in international business, the foreign bills are more used, which is also called as letter of credit, where importers and exporters bank are more involved in transacting the business transactions due to heavy cash transactions happening in those business activities, where this kind of foreign bills are used more in common in the international business. Now the third negotiable instrument which we are going to discuss quite elaborately rather is checks. As we all know about checks, because it is more old and very often and worldwide used instrument for making payment or for using it for the bank transactions, etc. Checks are the conventional methodology adopted by banks for for making any kind of cash transactions to its customers. So it is a document that orders the bank to pay a specific amount of money from the person's account to the person in whose name the check is drawn or has been issued. The person writing the check is the drawer. The transaction must have a banking account where their money is held. So if we want to use any check, first of all, the mandatory requirement is the person must hold an account in the bank. Otherwise, it is not possible to use a check in their own name. Suppose if I want to use a check, which means I must have an account with the banker. So, as per Section 6 of Negotiable Instrument Act of 1881 states that or defines check as a bill of exchange drawn on a specified banker and not expressed to be payable otherwise than on demand. So in simple language we can say check is a bill of exchange, right, drawn on a bank, specified bank, payable on demand. So whenever we whenever the check is given to handed over to a banker, it states it demands that amount of money to be paid by the banker either to the bearer of the instrument or on the order of the customer it should be paid to somebody. Thus, a check is a bill of exchange with two additional qualifications. They are, it is always drawn on a bank. So, it is very, very essential. The second qualification of the check is it is always payable on demand. So, it is an unconditional order. It is a demand what is being placed by the customer to make that payment to himself, to the customer himself or to somebody else on the order of the customer to banker. All the checks are bills of exchange, but all bills are not checks. So, even though checks are considered as bill of exchange, but bills are not considered as checks. So, both are completely different from one another. So, essential features of check. So, again here the same point repeats. It has to be in writing. So, it is an unconditional order to a banker to whom it is being drawn. So it has to be drawn on a specified banker. So if you are writing a check, it is very, very clear to which bank you are issuing that particular check. So it is it has to be specified. Now they have made it more and more easy because it will be pre-printed. Everything is printed on the check, so you don't have to worry about that. So next time when you fill a check, better you check it. What are the essential requirements that are pre-printed on a check leaf? So payee to be certain. So payee must be a person to whom the money need to be given on demand. So if you are elaborating this particular point, there are three important parties involved. So first one is the drawer of the instrument, the person who draws the check. So maker of the check, one who the customer of the bank who is issuing the check is the drawer. Drawee is the drawer's bank. So suppose if I write a check to somebody stating that asking my bank to make that payment to some other person, which means I will be the drawer and my bank becomes the drawee bank, and the payee who receives the money from my bank on behalf of me. That is, I have to make the payment. Instead of making direct payment to the person, I am asking my bank to make the payment. So the person, the beneficiary will be the payee here. So payee to be certain, which means I cannot without knowing that person, I cannot ask or direct my bank to make the payment. I have to specify. You would have seen in the line, if it is pay to, in the place of pay to or next to pay to, you will be writing somebody's name, or if you are paying it to college, you will be writing the college address or university, or to somebody whom the money has to be paid, and the beneficiary becomes the payee in this case. A certain sum of money, so it has to be, it always concludes with consideration, monetary consideration, of course, because it is a negotiable instrument. So a certain sum of money and that certain sum of money must be specifically mentioned. So if we are talking about check, it has to be entered both in figures as well as words. It has to match, which we are going to discuss in few other topics in the same chapter. So it has to be filled, and a certain sum of money need to be specified by the drawer. Payable on demand: when drawer makes or issues a check to a bank, it is an order that he is issuing to the banker to make that payment to payee. So it is always payable on demand. To be signed by the drawer. So if drawer makes draws the check, makes a check here or fills a check, issues a check, he has to sign. Unless and until he signs in the instrument, it will not be considered as a valid instrument for executing the order of the drawer. So these are essential features of check. So next we'll be moving on to types of checks. First one is bearer check. So altogether we have 7 types of checks which are mentioned, or kinds of check. You may get a question, either types of checks or kinds of checks. First one is the bearer check. So when the word bearer appearing on the face of the check and are not cancelled, the check is called as bearer check. The bearer check is payable to the person specified therein or to any other else who presents it to the bank for the payment. Suppose if you go to a bank for encashing a particular check, suppose if your parents have an account there, either your mom or dad has an account in the bank, they write a check but they don't cross it, they'll ask you to encash that particular check. When you go and give it to a personnel there across the counters, you will become the bearer of the instrument, which means you have to even sign in that. So you have to get that money. If you have not signed in that particular check, the personnel will ask you to do so, because to make you as a bearer. So that is what the bearer check. Second one is order check. When the word bearer appearing on the face of the check is cancelled, and when it is placed with the word order is written on the face of the check, then it becomes order check. Such order checks is payable to the person specified therein as a payee, or to anyone else to whom it is endorsed. So to whom it has to pay, only to that person it has to be, usually it will be payee, it has to be paid to that person only. So that is on the order of somebody. Then next we have open check or uncrossed check. Uncrossed, you would have seen 2 parallel transverse lines across the face of the check makes the check as crossed check. Suppose if we don't cross the check, then it will be called as open check. When a check is not crossed, the payment of such check can be obtained at the counter of the bank, which is actually it's not very safe, but usually if you have an account and if you want to directly encash it, now we have other modes of getting money. We can go to ATM and get the transaction done, we can get the cash. Earlier it was not used to be like that. There were no ATMs at that time. So people, if they wanted money, they used to write an open check, go to bank, and across the counters they used to hand over the check and used to take the money. So it was more useful at that time, and now people are not going for this purpose. If you have not done, it is better if you go for once, at least once, to know and understand about that. Then crossed check, crossing of parallel lines, transverse lines on the face of the check with or without additional words. It can be even written as account payee, or even if you don't write and if just cross the check, that becomes a cross check, and it is also called as closed check. Suppose if you cross a check, you cannot encash it across the counters. You have to drop it in the drop box in the branches, and that will be credited into your account, but you cannot directly withdraw the money using a crossed check. So it is one way making it an account payee check in order to increase the security aspect of the account holder, for the account holder. Then we have antedated check. When a particular check which bears a date earlier than the date on which it is presented to the bank, then it is called as antedated check. Then we have postdated. If a check bears a date which is yet to come, that is future date, then it is called as postdated check. Stale check is a check which is presented for the payment after 6 months from the date of the issue, then it is called as stale check. Stale checks will not be accepted by the banker. So I think now it is clear about the features and the types or kinds of checks. So we will be moving on to the next topic, that is crossing of the check. So in the kinds of check we also discussed about drawing two parallel transverse lines across the face of the check makes an open check into closed check, and where we cannot withdraw the money directly from the bank across the counters, it has to be credited into somebody's account only. So that is what the concept called crossing. So here we are going to discuss about what is the meaning of crossing of the check and what are different types of crossing that are usually adopted under check system by banks. So we'll start with the meaning. Crossing is a direction to the banker not to pay the check across the counter, but to pay to a bank only or to a particular bank in an account with the bank. Thus, crossing provides a protection and safeguard to the owner of the check, as by securing the payment through a banker, it can easily be detected to whose use the money is received. So here if we are talking about before going into the meaning, so you know about check now. It is an instrument which is used for either withdrawing the money or making the payment to somebody instead of making cash payments. So there are two types of checks, open check and closed check. Open check is one where you can withdraw the money across the counter. Suppose if you draw two transverse parallel lines across the face of the check, you cannot withdraw the money across the counters. It has to be credited into account of the person whose name is written. That is what is called as crossing, which is given under this particular meaning as well. So it is a direction to the paying banker. So who is a paying banker? If you have an account with somebody, if you are drawing a check on your bank, that bank becomes a paying banker because it is making the payment on behalf of the customer. So it is a direction given to paying banker to pay the money generally to a banker or to a particular banker, as the case may be, or not to pay the holder across the counter. Even if you hold a check and hand over that to a personnel across the counters, they will not honor it. Instead, they will ask you to put it in the drop box because it is a crossed check. Crossed check is always a closed check and you cannot withdraw the money across the counter. See, our objective of this particular concept of crossing is just to secure the payment to a banker so that it could be traced to the person receiving the amount of the check. Suppose, say for example, you have an open check and you lose it somewhere. Anybody can go and withdraw the money, but it cannot be detected properly. But if it is in the case of cross check, if the check is crossed, it has to be credited into somebody's account, and immediately once the amount is credited into somebody's account, you as well as your bank can trace who has misused this particular check, and it is possible to catch hold of the person. This is how an ultimate security is given to the account holder just by mere crossing of the check. Okay, so there are different types of check. It is also called as modes of crossing as well as types of crossing. So here types of crossing includes general crossing, special crossing, not negotiable crossing, account payee crossing, and double crossing. These are some of the types of crossing. So each one we are going to discuss in detail. So first one is general crossing. So what it is stating here, when a check bears two transverse parallel lines at the left hand side of its top corner, words such as "and company" or any other abbreviation may be written between these two parallel lines either with or without words not negotiable is called as general crossing. So what is the effect of this? Suppose if you just merely cross a particular check without writing with or without writing anything, any words in that, not negotiable is a condition, so you cannot write. That makes a specific crossing. So if we don't write not negotiable, or if we are not writing anything in those two transverse lines, just mere crossing will make it a general crossing. So what is the effect of general crossing? Payment can be paid through only bank account and should not be made at the counter of the paying bank. So if you have a cross check, if you go to a bank, if you go to your bank, you cannot get that money because it has to be paid only to the account of the account holder but not directly to the holder of the instrument. Then special crossing is the second type, when the check bears the name of the bank in between two parallel lines with or without the words not negotiable is called special crossing, which means what is the difference between general and special crossing here? In general crossing, there is no company's name or bank's name is written. It is generally crossed. It can be used only for account payment. Where in case of special crossing, the checks bears the name of the bank, so it has to be given only to that bank. That is why it is called as special crossing. The effect of special crossing is the bank will pay to the banker whose name is written in between the crossing lines. So it is drawn on a particular bank to whom the check will be transferred in order to get the payment done or to execute that particular special crossing. Then third one, we have account payee crossing. It is also called as restrictive crossing. In this crossing, the check is done by writing account payee. I think it is more popular, more commonly used. You would have seen writing account payee in the two transverse line. Account payee or account payee only in between two crossing lines. The effect of this particular type is payment will be credited into account of the payee named in the check. Suppose if you are making payment to somebody, if you write that person's name and write it as account payee, by crossing the check, it will be credited into the account of that person only. Then next type is not negotiable crossing. A person is taking check crossed generally or specially, bearing in either case the words not negotiable, shall not be able to give a better title to the holder than that of the transferor. Not negotiable. The effect of this crossing is that the check can be transferred, but the transferee will not acquire a better title of the check, which means a check is deprived of its essential features of negotiability. So the object of not negotiable is to protect the drawer against a loss or theft in the course of transit. So in case of heavy cash transactions between the drawer and the payee, if they write not negotiable, then automatically the transferee will lose the a better title when he gets it. The next one is double crossing. When the check bears two special crossing is called as double crossing. In this case, second bank act as an agent to the first bank, that is the collecting banker. It is made when the banker in whose favor the check is crossed does not have the branch where the check is to be paid. So due to this particular double crossing, if the check is crossed to two or more banks, the paying banker will be put in the confused position as to whom he has to make the payment. So there will be two banks for whom it is crossed. So one bank will be acting as an agent to another bank. So the agent bank will collect the money from the paying banker and he transfers that amount to the payee bank to whom the money has to be credited into. Okay, so that is what the purpose of double crossing. Suppose if there are no more branches are available in a particular town or city and it has to be drawn on a particular bank, this kind of crossing can be adopted. Okay, so that is about crossing. Then we have the next topic is endorsement. So endorsement, as it is given, you can see even on the screen, is derived from the Latin word en means upon, dorsum means the back. The word endorsement in literal sense means a writing on the back of the instrument. But under Negotiable Instrument Act, it means the writing of one's name on the back of the instrument or any paper attached to it with an intention of transferring the rights therein. The attached slip is called as a launch. So where suppose in case of too many authorized signatories are there, and if the check is not sufficient to get the signature of all the signatories, they can attach a slip which is called as a launch, where they can sign, and that is also considered to be a valid instrument. So we'll be moving on to definition of endorsement. Merely if we are talking about the endorsement, it is just a signature what we do in the check. So that gives a better idea to you people. So if we sign in any of the instrument, that we are making that by signing in the instrument as more negotiable, more valid and more legal. So here endorsement is, if we are explaining in terms of checks here, it's an extension of the topic check what we are discussing. So endorsement is a signature that we make it on the face of the check as well as at the back or the overleaf of the check is the endorsement what we merely refers to. So according to the definition, that is section 15 of the Negotiable Instrument Act of 1881, states that where the maker or holder of the negotiable instrument signs the same, so same means any instrument, otherwise than as such maker for the purpose of negotiable on the back or the face thereof, or a slip of a paper annexed to thereto, he is said to enclose the same and is called the endorser. So here as per the definition, let me explain the definition here. So what it says, where the maker or holder of the instrument signs the same. So either the maker, drawer of the instrument, or the maker or holder of the instrument. In case of double crossing also, like we saw, so there will be few more, many signatures that you can find here. Suppose if they are using a launch again, so maker or holder of the negotiable instrument signs the same means the instrument, otherwise than as such maker for the purpose of negotiable. Why we have to sign in the instrument? In order to make it transferable, to make it more legal, either on the back or on the face of the instrument, or it can even be a slip of paper annexed. So I have already told you the annexed paper to any particular instrument for the purpose of endorsement is called as a launch. So this is for the this makes the signatory, the person who signs in the instrument, will be called as endorser. So that is what the last line says, he is said to enclose the same and is called as endorser. Essentials of valid endorsement. So first of all, again, it must be in writing. So instrument must be in writing and be signed by the endorser. There are two parties here, endorser and endorsee. So endorser is a person who makes the signature, endorsement. To whom the instrument is being transferred, that person is endorsee. The second essentials of a valid endorsement is the endorser should sign in the instrument in the same style. They cannot change often their style of signing. They have to maintain uniformity in endorsement. Signatures should be in ink pen only. They cannot use any other. It does not mean that they have to use only the ink pen. So they should not use the pencils. It cannot be easily erasable. So that is the reason why they specifically say signatures must be done in pen only. So mere signatures of the holder constitutes the endorsement. So even by signing, just by mere signing the instrument, will be considered it as an endorsement. There is no need for writing any more sentences and words along with the signature. Just a mere signature also considered as endorsement. It should be made by the holder or maker. So it has to be always the maker of the instrument who has to sign or endorse in the instrument. The delivery of the instrument must be with an intention of passing it to endorsee. So unnecessarily if they sign, it will not be considered as an endorsement. So if they have to transfer a particular instrument to endorsee, only then they have to sign in the instrument, and that will be considered at that time, at that point of time, the person or the maker of the instrument will be called as endorser. So he has to have an intention of transferring the instrument for a particular monetary consideration. At that time, the endorsement will be considered as more valid. An endorsement may be made in blank or full. So the endorsement can be blank or full, means either he can merely put a signature or he can write some words why he is doing that particular endorsement. That makes it as a full endorsement. Married women must include the name of her husband if she wants to make it as a more authenticated and legal endorsement. So that is also a necessary, valid, essential criteria. Then the next topic is kinds of endorsement. So we have here different types of endorsement, and actually broadly it is classified into 5 categories and few more which is also act as a subcategory under kinds of endorsement. We'll discuss each one. So first one is blank or general endorsement. So if the endorser signs his name only and does not specify the name of the endorsee, the endorsement is said to be blank. Okay, so suppose if we sign, say for example, if we just sign in a particular instrument, we are making a blank endorsement where we are not giving an information to whom, to whom or who is the endorsee, to whom that particular instrument is being transferred. Then second kind of endorsement is full endorsement or special endorsement. If the endorser in addition to his signature, he adds a direction to pay that amount mentioned in that particular instrument or order of a specified person to whom it is being paid, then it becomes a full endorsement. Then partial endorsement. Partial endorsement is one where he transfers the right to receive only a part payment of the amount due on the installment is invalid. For example, you can see a holder of a bill, A holds a bill for rupees 2000 and endorses in favor of B for rupees 1000, and in favor of C the remaining 1000, then endorsement is considered as partial. Even though this concept of partial endorsement is there, in this situation it is considered to be invalid. So endorser cannot partially pay the amount in the same instrument to more than one individual here. If he has to make 2 instruments separately where he has to go for a full endorsement rather than partial endorsement. Then fourth one is restrictive endorsement. And a restrictive endorsement which expresses the words prohibits the endorsee from further negotiating the instrument or restrict the endorsee to deal with his instrument as directed by the endorser is restrictive. So it is also explained with the help of an example. B is a holder of the bill, makes an endorsement on the bill saying pay C only. So what is a restriction here? B is giving an instruction to make the payment only to C, but C, when he gets that particular payment, he cannot negotiate the bill further. So he has to get the bill. So if it is not a restrictive endorsement, he would have definitely negotiated the bill to somebody else. But now as it is a restrictive endorsement and it is specifically given by person B who states that it is a restrictive endorsement and it has to be paid only to C, and even C will not get any freedom to make the bill more negotiable in future. Then conditional endorsement. If the endorser of a bill or an instrument by expressing the words in the endorsement makes his liability dependent on happening a specified event. So that is a condition. So in the event of something, make the payment. So there are so many this one, like say for example, if we are talking about medical insurance bonds. In the event of this particular cause, make the payment. So that is a condition. So even though it is not a bill, I am just giving an example here. So here, as per the example, pay B or order of his marriage or for the purpose of education. Only in the event of that particular cause or any situation arises, only then the payment need to be made. That is why it is called as conditional endorsement. Then under under restrictive endorsement, we have few more subdivisions. First one is sans recourse endorsement. This endorsement done in such a way that endorser does not incur any liability just by adding sans recourse. So pay X without recourse to me. So no recourse, no liability to X when they are making any payment to Y. Then sans phrase endorsement, where the endorser does not want the endorsee of any subsequent holder of the instrument to incur any expenses on his account. So it is a contradiction to the previous one, if we are stating here. So here the endorser does not want the endorsee to get any liability here in this situation. Then facultative endorsement, when the endorser expressly give up some of his rights under the negotiable instrument, and the instrument is called as facultative. So as it is stated here, pay X or order or notice of dishonor waived. So that is a facultative endorsement.